Welcome to DMM Downloads. We are podcasting another conversation about DMM between Jeff Crabtree and me, Rudy Rivera. Jeff and I are teamed together in Northern Colorado in a ministry we call DMM NOCO. DMM NOCO is unleashing disciple-making movements in Northern Colorado, and we thought it a good idea to start a podcast as a way to bring awareness and resourcing to ordinary people who are passionate about making multiplying disciple makers in our natural networks. Thanks for joining us in this journey. We hope you get a DMM download from this conversation. Hey, Jeff.
Rudy.
We're on again, recording another DMM download. And this time, it's a Thursday. And this time, we're on Zoom again. Because I've been a little bit sick.
Rudy.
What's that?
They can't see you, Rudy, but I can see you, Rudy.
Yeah, that's right. And I can see Jeff. You guys can't see me, but that's normal for you guys because y'all listen wherever podcasts are found. Thank you for listening. So hopefully you're getting downloads as we are. Jeff and I have just been talking off camera, sharing a few things. And I think we've got a few ideas that we want to talk about today. We're going to continue in our habits conversations, our habits downloads, talking about a symbol, the habit of a symbol, which is number 6 in our DMM habits training. And so I'm going to toss it to Jeff, and it might come back my way, but I wanted to give it over to Jeff and say, let's unpack what could be a little, maybe some sensitive topics today.
Yeah, Rudy, as we talked, maybe I think on the last session, when we say a symbol, what does that mean for someone? We're talking about what would be kind of the biblical word ecclesia, or more common for people, church. What is church? What does it look like? What's its function? How do we operate? And I think we said off camera, and I think we say it now, is what disciple-making movements have done for both of us and our habits training is to wrestle with things that we thought we already had in place. Again, 40 years in traditional ministry, when I got introduced to DMM, it forced me to ask and answer questions that I thought were already asked and answered in the past. And so there has to be some paradigm shift. So why we're doing this, and again, and to tiptoe into this whole thing of a symbol or ecclesia or church, what is it? What does it look like? What is its function? Is really we're inviting anybody listening to wrestle with us on what does God have in mind when He instituted or is wanting the church to form and to be in function. So we're just saying maybe the Western model doesn't have it all figured out, and we're certainly not throwing ourselves or it under the bus, but we're willing to wrestle with asking some different questions. Does that lay a little foundation framework for us?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you and I both could share from our experiences that the Western model, which is, that's what we know. We're Westerners, and that's what we've been trained in. But I've called it a gravitational pull. There's a gravitational pull towards being church or doing church a certain way, living here. And that makes sense. So we're North Americans. That's how it goes. But we are really talking about trying to lean into perhaps a different expression, or at least wrestling with what are purposes of the church and what can church even look like. So I know for me, even within this past year or 2, 3 years, I'm still, I know I'm going through like a paradigm shift and wrestling with how I know how to be the church and do church, how I think God wants me to look at it now, and how do I kind of navigate those tensions, because I do feel like tensions sometimes. Having a house church myself at this point, micro church, simple church, however you want to express that. I do still feel the gravitational pull on me towards the legacy model.
Sure. Well, again, what we're attempting to do, which is hard for all of us, we're trying to create a platform for us to step back and say, can we get a bigger picture, higher picture, eternal picture, and strip some of the elements that we know in regard to church and find the common essentials from a theological, biblical, practical point of view. And
Mhm.
you were mentioning to me off camera, that's why we want to do it on there, of a friend of yours
Mhm.
who you're in relationship with and ministering to, but lives pretty much in a different significant segment of
Mhm.
our area. Would you unpack that a little bit, because I think it has reference to kind of just the essence and the element of what does it mean to do church, be the church. If that makes enough sense, I think you realize what I was asking you in regard to that friend of yours. Can you unpack that a little bit for us, Rudy?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for turning the table my way on that. I think what I've just come to realize, and so I'm pastoring a house church in our home, in our neighborhood. And what I'm realizing over the last couple of years is as I interact with different people in the community and relationships get built and maybe friendships form or, various things happen out there in the world. Um, the old model for me would be maybe invite my friend to church or maybe, um, yeah, just, hey, would you want to be a part of my church or a church, But I think at this point, pastoring this house church, my paradigm has shifted where my friend lives, it's probably 40 to 45 minutes away, drive time. And we don't even live in a big city or anything, but it just takes the time to get over through the neighborhoods and back roads over to their house. And so, I think why would I invite him to my church, that's 45 minutes away from him? I It would be extracting him from his natural network. So we think about disciple making movements, we say ordinary people in natural networks. Well, that would be completely unnatural to bring him out of his natural network. So that's one of the paradigm shifts that's happened for me. And then two, what do we think about churches, especially as pastors? We want to grow our churches. And usually that means lots of things, but includes numerically. And I think, well, no, I'm not really that interested in growing our house church larger in numbers. So for one, our house can only fit a certain amount of people comfortably. But secondly, when you combine the natural network idea and the numerical idea, I think, well, let's just see another church express for where he lives, if God wills that. And so, I don't think there's, I don't see any advantage or any, um, yeah, any reason to bring him into our church like we would have done perhaps in the traditional legacy model. I feel like no, rather, okay, let's see him raised up to lead an ecclesia, a church, a gathering, an assembly where he lives, where he works, learns, and plays with his people, his own sphere of influence. And that I think is a way to then start to see movement happen. You see multiplication, replication happening at a smaller scale in terms of the local expression, but I think probably a larger scale when it comes to the region. If we start to see more smaller expressions of church in natural networks, that just makes a lot more sense to me. And what's interesting, and I don't know if you're asking this, but I think as a traditional church pastor all these years, and I think when I talk to church people, I get the question all the time where people are asking me, um, well, are you hoping to double it or you're going to get to what size are you trying to get your church to? And I'm like, I don't, I don't have a number on that. I think it's, can we multiply in other expressions around our region is kind of where my mind goes. But I don't know if that answers
So
the
yeah, that's good. That's unpacking again because I know you and because we've been involved in disciple making movements for a number of years, it's easier for me to hear and accept kind of what you're saying, but I'm not sure 7.5 years ago when I got exposed to disciple making movements, if you started talking about house church,
Mhm.
you say that pretty normal and natural. Back then, house church was a little edgy for me and a little
Mhm.
weird for me, and forgive
Mhm.
me, maybe a little cultic. And
Mhm.
so at some point, maybe here we need to unpack a little bit about that, or maybe even another
Mhm.
session. And then the other thing you said, well, maybe we equip him to uh, start, launch, catalyze a church where
Mhm.
he's at. That's a
Mhm.
little weird to me in
Mhm.
an old paradigm. So
Mhm.
can you lean into that a little bit and help those of us that are those that are listening who aren't in the same genre and again trying to define what we mean by that? That seems a little bit edgy to me. I'm not sure, Rudy, I want to go that direction. I think we're trying to say something a little different that's more functional than form, but can you speak to that real briefly?
Well, I'll try. Gosh, you got me thinking church. Yeah, so two.
Well, how about the house church thing? I don't know about you, but when I was kind of if you would have talked to me about house church, home church, a while back, I would have go, hey, whoa, whoa, I'm not sure I'm going there. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, well, I would say I'm in your same boat. I would have said that those same words 5 years ago, probably even 6 years ago, whatever, 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. So yeah, I do think it's been a the weirdness, if you will, has left because of a paradigm shift. But and I don't know if this is going to be helpful to anybody listening, but I would just say this is partly in response to, I think, as I see church in North America, I think it takes all sizes, shapes, and forms of church to reach the population. But I'm talking about trying to be on mission and trying to multiply disciple makers. And so I think in response to trying to be on mission and be a multiplying disciple maker, a house church or a smaller expression of church makes more sense to me. Not because we don't need the larger churches, we do need them, but I think people aren't coming. Generally speaking, people are not going to church anymore in our society. So, thus, this is an opportunity to engage people where they're at, where they live, work, learn, and play, so that we can have churches expressed where people are rather than expecting people to come to us. So, that's partly why house church to me has been a paradigm shift. It's because of the mission, Great Commission specifically, and then also as a way to investigate or engage that mission in a new paradigm to see if this may be part of the solution to reaching northern Colorado in our context. So I don't know if that helps, but that's
Yeah, thanks,
yeah.
Rudy. I think that's what I was trying to get to is, when I heard of house church, home church before, it was like a certain group of people who don't like what's going on in traditional church. And so they're going to rally together and say, we're going to do our own thing. We don't want anything to do with you. And then it gets very ingrown and it can get very weird and separate. But I like what you said is that basically when you're thinking about being on mission or being missional or equipping people to step into their natural networks, that the smaller setting, whether you do it in a home or a building or a park somewhere else, that because of its function and its desire to do something different than just a huddle, that it could be appropriate. So I'm glad you delineated that because before I just saw weird house churches. They were Christians but they didn't like what was going on in traditional church. So we're going to break away and do our own thing and be, isolated. And that's not
Yeah,
what we're saying, or either one of us are saying in disciple making movements, but it's to get more missional and more lean and more functional than form to really, spread the kingdom of God where we live, learn, work, and play. Right?
I agree. Yes. And I would also say, like house church in my paradigm, the way I'm thinking of it, or ecclesia, the habit of assemble, I'm not thinking of it in terms of just a smaller version of a legacy church.
Correct.
So at that point, I think just be legacy church and have all the resources big and all that. I think it's really more streamlined to try to be missional, in specifically missional and multiplying disciple makers. So that's a good delineation. And really quickly, I want to say, as to the leadership, like appointing or recognizing leaders, and this could open up a whole can of worms. We could go down this road far, but my tradition, the churches that I've been raised in, the tradition has used Titus 1 and 1 Timothy 3 as Paul's Apostle Paul's writings as sort of a baseline for who is prepared and assigned to lead churches. So those are kind of the two scriptural references we've used. And that's going back 20 something years in my life. So it hasn't been necessarily like education, make sure you're the most educated in the room. It's been more who meets his character qualifications.
Yeah.
And the thing that strikes me with that really, and we got to end here, but the thing that strikes me, I think it's in Titus. I could be wrong. It might be Timothy, but I think it's in Titus. I mean, the picture I get, Jeff, and we talked about this recently, the picture I get is Paul says, like, if anyone would desire these things, they desire a good thing. And I get this picture that people got around each other, this community, this group of people, and said, who knows Jesus? Who exemplifies these character traits, these qualifications for eldership or for leadership? And I think everybody could agree. They would look at each other and say, well, it's not Jim, but it's definitely Sam, And then everybody would say, yeah, or it's so-and-so, not so-and-so, or whatever. And people would say, yeah, amen. And so then they would lean in and say, okay, you're leading this ecclesia in this village, in this place for that time. And I think that's kind of what happened. I'm not a Bible scholar, but that's the image I get. And so I think kind of with that mindset, I think the idea comes, well, yeah, we could see ecclesia started in northern Colorado if we were to lean into these qualifications and releasing, and we're maybe going to talk about that in the next episode, releasing with power into the mission of God that he has planned for the church. So anyhow, that's my thought.
Great. Thanks for unpacking.
Yeah, hopefully that wasn't too much. Thanks for listening to this podcast. That's going to be it for this particular download. Thanks, Jeff, for that engaging download. In DMM, we like to say that disciples are learners. I know I'm learning a lot from my conversations with you, Jeff. From all of us in DMM NoCo, we hope you got a DMM download from the conversation today. Don't forget to leave this podcast a review wherever you are listening online. If you found this conversation helpful, please head over to our site, dmmnoco.com, where you can find more content for your DMM journey, including a self-paced Habits of a Multiplying Disciple course. The course is designed to give you practical next steps to becoming a DMM practitioner and multiplying disciple maker. You can take that course for free at dmmnoco.com. We will be back next week with another engaging DMM download episode. Until then, may you hear from God through his Spirit and take simple steps of obedience in what you hear.